Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's instalment I shall be reviewing the BF110 C4. To give you a brief historical overview on the BF110 and the iteration depicted here in War Thunder, the Bayerische Flugzeugwerke 700 Zerstörer was a German twin-engined heavy fighter designed in 1934 and developed through to its first flight as of the 12th of May 1936. The plane was a strategic fighter, which was to form the basis of the German Luftwaffe's elite Zerstörergruppen leading into the Battle of Britain as of 1940. In its own right, the BF-110 was a very successful heavy fighter. However, when matched up against Allied monoplanes such as the Spitfire and the Hurricane, the BF-110 was at a major disadvantage in terms of performance. The C-series depicted here was introduced in the latter half of 1938 in terms of design, with the first versions being introduced to service as of January 1939. The C-series differed from the B-series by changing out the already in place Junker-Jumo 210GA engines, which provided 730 horsepower per engine, for a pair of Daimler-Benz DB601A1 engines providing 1100 horsepower per engine. This increased the performance of the BF-110 to a massive extent, and no other major changes were included. Indeed, a number of historians believe that it was this change in engine and overall change in performance which encouraged the Luftwaffe into believing that the BF-110 would be the match for the Spitfire and the Hurricane during the Battle of Britain. The C-4, in particular, as depicted in War Thunder here, was the first variant of the C-series to introduce nominal armour for both pilot and gunner, an afterthought in the C1 through to C3 versions, as a result providing greater security for the plane's occupants and therefore trying to guarantee the crew to come home safely after a long mission. With that being said, how exactly does the BF-110 C4 handle in War Thunder? Well, from the outset this plane is an absolute monster at its battle rating of 2.3. The BF-110 C4 lives up to its name of heavy fighter, and indeed its German name as Zerstörer, or destroyer in common English, simply because of its armament and its incredible ability to take punishment when and where necessary. Having already achieved 2 kills and breaking on for a couple of assists, in this gameplay on the airfield domination map Britain, I'm going to push the BF-110 C4 to its limit of durability and indeed its limit of what it can do. The armament, consisting of 4 7.92mm machine guns and 2 20mm MG-FFM cannons in the nose, combined with 1 rear-facing 7.92mm machine gun turret in the back, is a very good armament, simply because that nose cone allows you to rip targets to shreds, as depicted here with this I-15 coming into land for my 3rd kill. We now move on to the situation of exactly where the BF-110 is strong and where it is weak. I go into a head-to-head with a Heinkel 112A0, achieving a nice critical for minimal damage on my own plane. As we can see here, we're abusing our durability to a massive extent and our overall nose cone in order to force our opponents into critical situations. However, my lack of overall energy at this point as I try to break away means that an enemy BF-110 C4 is coming after me, and so I bleed speed as much as possible here by A, switching off the engine, B, deploying landing flaps, and C, shaking the plane all over the place like a madman. By doing this and then lifting up the nose, I cause the enemy BF-110 C4 to overshoot, and then I can bring myself around to achieve a succession of hits on the BF-110 C4, who has now overshot me. I take out their left flaps, and therefore I break off as friendly fighters go after them. I notice an enemy F1M2 gradually coming around, and as I look behind I see that enemy lag-free 35 is also going onto my tail, and so I screw up this pass on the Japanese float plane and have to contend with a lag-free 35 that has run out of 20mm cannon rounds. Again, using the same strategy of landing flaps, shaking all over the place and turn off my engine, I eventually cause the lag-free 35 to overshoot, at which point I turn the engine back on and build what speed I can to come around on them, as their wide turn circle means that I have ample opportunity to take them out, as we are about to see. With my ace already in the bag, I then break on to another BF-110 C4 to achieve what I believe is my 6th kill, after one major critical hit. Or perhaps this is just going to be another assist. In the meantime, let us discuss the overall strengths of this plane. As we have depicted, that a strength and a weakness of the BF-110C4 is its ability to bleed speed very quickly, with the combination of landing flaps, switching off the engine, and indeed making slight adjustments to your overall direction of movement. At the same time, this is a disadvantage because when you perform boom and zoom runs, if you begin to try and turn with opponents, you lose a lot of your speed very quickly, and do not be surprised if a slight roll and turn causes you to bleed well over 100 to 200 km an hour in a very short space of time. Additional strengths include the armament, which I'm going to go into now. The setup I'm using is omni-purpose ammunition for the machine guns in the nose, air target ammunition for the 20mm cannons, APT rounds for that rear turret, and a 500 metre gun convergence. On top of that I have a 30-minute fuel load. The 500 metre gun convergence and indeed the 30-minute fuel load are standardised types for whenever I fly any fighter aircraft, with the convergence being due to the fact all the armament is in the nose. Meanwhile, I use omni-purpose ammunition for the front-facing machine guns because they consist of the largest amount of tracer and armour-piercing combination, in my opinion, and as a result this makes the rounds the most effective. Indeed, I carry this through with the air target ammunition, which carries a large amount of tracer, but indeed a large amount of high explosive and fragmentation incendiary rounds in order to achieve those critical wing cuts or pilot kills. As we come round on an enemy BF-110C4 who is focused on a friendly bell ending, we take them out accordingly for our 7th kill, before breaking after this KI-61 Co, achieving a glancing hit but nothing critical. We then break away, and I continue with my analysis of armament. The air target ammunition for the 20mm cannons in my opinion is the most effective simply because you've got the tracers to show where your rounds are going, along with the machine gun tracers of course, and you've got that nice complement of high explosive and FI rounds which lead to a lot of kills very quickly. The rear facing machine gun, I have employed APT rounds, armour piercing tracer rounds, not because they will be very powerful, and indeed do not expect to get a lot of kills with that rear facing gunner, not only for the ammunition power but also for the problem with the gunner which I'll come onto a little later. By having the tracers firing from the turret, this allows me to be fully aware of the fact when I've got an enemy plane on my tail, as depicted with that lag-free 35 that was coming in on me that I only caught out the glimpse of my eye. By having a constant stream of tracers pretty much firing out from the screen into my face means that I'm actually able to tell when I've got an enemy plane behind me, especially if I mistake the sound of gunfire for something else. As a result, this gives me a great amount of warning as to when I'm being pursued. The problem with this rear facing turret is that it cannot fire dead level with the rear of the plane, and as a result if you are trying to take down a BF-110C4 and you are right behind it in say a lag-free 35 or a Hawker Hurricane Mark IIA, a very good way of taking this plane out is get exactly level with it from behind, because at which point unless the pilot lifts the nose up, that rear gunner cannot fire at you and you can start laying in the damage as quickly and as smoothly as you want. However, I digress from the analysis of the overall strengths and weaknesses of the BF-110 and we're going to come on to some more now. The plane's durability is excessive and is absolutely monstrous. We've already taken significant damage to our fuselage, tail and right hand wing, and we are still flying at a very good capacity with only slight degradation in performance. Indeed, the plane is listing very slightly to the right, especially as I try to level out, although this is nothing to worry about. Unless you take damage to the engines, which can be quite common if your opponent knows where to aim, this plane will keep on flying for a very long period of time, and indeed has been depicted when I've gone after enemy BF-110s in this game. As we boom and zoom past on that BF-110 there, taking out their rear gunner, we loop over to catch them once again as they go after a friendly target. I believe it's a friendly G4M1 that has caught their eye. And we very quickly put this BF-110C4 down on the ground. As well as durability and the ability to bleed energy very quickly, and indeed the impressive armament, what else is to compliment on the BF-110's overall performance? Well, for a heavy fighter this plane turns quite well with speed. You always want to open up your turn fights at a speed of roughly 400 to 450 km an hour. And really as soon as you start to fall below 300 km an hour, turn fighting needs to be disengaged automatically, because the performance window for turn fighting in the BF-110C4 is incredibly small. As a result, 1 or 2 turns will be enough. However, if you cannot get onto the back of your opponent following your second turn, I would advise breaking off and running for it. because your turn circle will become very sluggish, by comparison with planes such as the Yak-1B, who will suddenly gain the upper hand by an immense margin. Planes such as the Lag-3 35 and indeed other planes of that calibre can provide quite nice targets, and so, because of their extended turn circles, do not be afraid to turn with them even at lower speeds, although, as I say, most opponents such as the Spitfire Mark 1A, the Hawker Hurricane Mark 1A, the Japanese Ki-43 and other planes of that calibre will be able to outturn you pretty much at all speeds, even with landing flaps on. As I break up on this Junkers 88A4, we're about to note that the BF-110 also has quite a good climb rate and indeed can maintain its energy quite well on a climb. We managed to achieve a nice hit on the Junkers 88's left wing, setting them on fire as we break down this enemy Heinkel 51A. As a result, while we are in an airfield domination game here, in reality this extends very nicely into a ground strike game, whereby that initial climb session at the start can be performed very well by the BF-110, allowing you to get up to altitudes of say 4,000 metres almost as rapidly as some of your monoplane counterparts. While you will not be out climbing planes such as the Ki-43, the Spitfire Mark 1A and the F2A-3 Buffalo, you can climb with planes such as the Hawker Hurricane and the P-36C, which means that you'll be able to get up to bomber heights and harass the enemy bombers in the form of Blenheims, Beauforts, Junkers 88s and Heinkel 111s quite nicely and easily. And with your brilliant armament, it means you can bring down the toughest foes, including the PBYs and the H6Ks, with little bother on occasion, especially if you also aim towards the wings and the engines, making sure to take out the gunners at first with your fragmentation, incendiary and high explosive cannon rounds. It's at this point, up at 2,054 metres, I tried to pursue an SBD-3 Dauntless, who was chasing after a friendly I-15. I tell the I-15 to turn around or try to sort of split S. Unfortunately, they get caught by the SBD-3 Dauntless, although I get revenge for them very shortly. If you are looking to take out a BF-110 C-4 that is harassing friendly fighters, there are some other ways to do it other than trying to fly dead level with its tail. The BF-110 C-4, as I've said, has the weakness of bleeding energy very quickly, and as a result, if you can force it into an extended turn fight in say a Spitfire Mark 1A or a Spitfire Mark 2B, you will be able to take out the BF-110 quite easily. Additionally, another way of looking at things is that the BF-110, once it's lost its energy, cannot regain it as quickly as most monoplanes can, and as a result, successive boom and zoom passes in the BF-110 may actually work to your advantage, as I depicted in this game against an enemy BF-110, whereby I boom and zoomed on them and looped around for another pass, even though their focus was entirely on a different aircraft in particular. I note an enemy SB-2M in the distance, being harassed by a number of friendly planes, and having achieved 12 kills already, I decide to dive down and finish off with an unlucky 13th kill, simply because I've got the armament to take this enemy plane out while it's trying to escape from our friendly fighters. Other ways to beat the BF-110 are of course to, as well as boom and zoom passing on it, really not to let it to bog you down too much. While it is an absolutely deadly fighter, it's only deadly in its own radius of convergence. This is a plane which, if you can lure it off to the edge of the map, will be very slow to come back into the battlefield, and so do not be afraid to try to lure a BF-110 off to the edge and then break away and leave it to its own devices, simply because it's a very slow plane by comparison with most contemporaries. As I have said, the overall speed of performance is roughly somewhere between 350 to 450 km an hour, and this applies really at all altitudes. There is no significant performance differential at low or higher altitudes. Although I like to keep somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 metres in order to hunt enemy bombers and indeed ground attack aircraft, instead of mixing things up with the enemy fighters down low in the furballs. With that being said, and the game over, let's take a look at some post-game stats. So, upon reflection we see that our 13 kills and 3 assists netted us 35,553 silver lions. On top of this we earned 1,903 research points, with 381 of those going towards our research on the ME-163B. We conclude this review of the BF-110 C-4 by realising that it truly does live up to its name of Zerstörer, or Destroyer. So long as you can keep your opponents, whether they're fighters or bombers, in front of your plane and therefore in front of your fresh armament in the nose, you'll be able to take down most foes very quickly and easily, And with sustained bursts on heavy armed foes such as the H6K, you'll be able to use your enhanced durability to take them down and shrug off their turret fire. Moreover, your vice and virtue of being able to bleed speed works well if you've got an opponent right behind you, because you can force them to overshoot. However, at the same time, be aware that this lack of ability to retain energy means that slight manoeuvres and indeed turn fighting is not your strong point. As a result, I'd always recommend using a speed of 400 to 450 km an hour when trying to turn fight, with 1 or 2 turns being the maximum limit. If you drop below 300 km an hour, expect the plane to become sluggish and you'll need to break away. At the same time, I would not recommend flying above 550 km an hour, especially in a dive, as the roll rate begins to lock up and the plane has a very heavy-handed feel to it, which makes it very difficult to use in the boom and zoom capacity, which is going to be most ideal for this heavy fighter, which is able to climb with most of its monoplane contemporaries and possesses the armament to rip fighter and foe apart. By comparison to the rest of our team, we see that we came first by a significant margin, simply because we played to the strengths of our plane and used our vices and virtues in our favour. So, if you're looking for a heavy fighter which lives up to its reputation and can make very short work of anything it can face at its battle rating, the BF-110 C-4 is the heavy fighter for you. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed my first heavy fighter review video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies!